Welcome to the Code with Jason meetup. Today we're going to continue on with the ChatGPT Vim plugin that I've been building. Here's a little recap on where we left off. So we had a bug, and I'll demonstrate this bug. When we run a command that sends a test failure message to ChatGPT, we expect to get back some new code, but instead we get back nothing. So let me demonstrate that both for your sake and mine, because I haven't worked on this in like 2 weeks, so I don't really remember the details of it. Okay, so with this plugin, I can say something like, write me an RSpec test that, write me an
Jason,
RSpec test for a calculator. Oh yeah, I'm not sharing my screen, am I?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, share screen. Okay, write me an RSpec test for a calculator. And it should give us some code momentarily. Apparently the API is a little bit slow this morning. There we go. Okay. Now we can say run the test. Okay, and it'll ask for which pane I want to run it in. Okay. Okay, so there is our failure message. It says cannot load such file calculator. So on this first line here where we're saying require calculator, that's that's not connected to anything. No such thing exists. So naturally we're getting an error about it. Okay, what we are supposed to be able to do now, but we can't, if I remember correctly, is we're supposed to be able to send this test result to GPT, and it's supposed to give us back. Oh, okay. I'm remembering the details of the bug now. Okay, so this part works. We sent the failure message to GPT, and it gave us back some code that will supposedly make the test pass. I think if we run it again, it still won't work because this is not right. I think it needs to be require relative. I'll just do that part manually. Okay, now it passes. Okay, now I'll say something like, I don't like this test. Change it so there's just one test case. I think this might fail. No, that succeeded. Okay, so far so good. All right, well, let's try to do something more realistic and see where we run into issues. Okay, so let's think a second. What could we... Oh, I know. This is an example I did the other day. Um, I want to write a program that gives me factors for numbers. For example, if I give it, if I give it 8, it gives me back 1 8 and 2 4. Write me just one RSpec test case for this program. Let's see how well it does with that. Okay, and I'll tell it to run this test. Okay, and not surprisingly, that fails because there's no such thing as factor finder. We'll send that failure message to GPT, so it gives us back the code to make that pass. Okay, and that seemed not to work. So now we can look at the logs. Um, So we can look at the logs to try to find out what went wrong. Okay, so I'm trying to parse this log here. We sent it something and it sent us something back, but I can't exactly figure out what. I think our log is a little bit too hard to understand. So maybe let's improve the logging aspect of this program. Okay, so we have this class called API logger. Let's take a look at that. Okay, that's very simple. It just writes to a log file. Okay. Where do we use it? We have these classes called API request and API response. So let's take a look at those. I think at the time that we log these, we want to say what we're logging. So here, API request, and here we want to say, oh, are we even logging this? Maybe this works a little differently. Okay, API response. Does the response get logged? Oh yeah, it gets logged right there. Okay. Okay. So hopefully now our log will be a little bit more clear because requests and responses are labeled. Okay, and I'm going to delete the log contents so that when we read it next, there'll be a little bit less stuff to look at. I'm going to reload the plugin. Okay, now we can go through this process again. I'm giving it that same prompt to say, give me that test for a program that does factors. Okay, we'll send this to GPT. Okay, and nothing. So let's see what happened. Whoops. Sorry. Okay, so here we can see these things a little bit more clearly. The first request we're sending, how do I turn on word wrap in Vim? Let's see. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we can see here where we're sending our prompt. I want to write a program that gives me factors for numbers, blah, blah, blah. So that's the initial prompt. And it gives us back this code, which it had inserted into the editor. So far, so good. And here's the next request. And what did we send it? Give me a command to run the test factorspec.rb. Okay, so when I said run this test, this is what it sent to GPT because it needed to get the command to run the test. And the response was just rspec factor spec. So far, so good still. The next and final request was this, and this is where things stopped working correctly. Okay. So this is like the system message. It just says you're connected to a Vim plugin that helps me write code, blah, blah, blah. But then what's the actual message that I was sending it? Okay, because we're sending it JSON, role, system, content, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's something separate that we're supposed to be sending too. Because there's like this, I'm forgetting the terminology even. Bear with me a second. So this is like the system command that goes along with every single prompt. It just says, you're connected to a Vim program that helps me write code, blah, blah, blah. Gives a couple examples. And that goes with like every code request prompt. But in addition to this, there's supposed to be the content of that unique prompt. And I don't remember how that works. So let's look at the API request class. Yeah, see? Okay, there's supposed to be the system prompt and then the user prompt. That's the term that I wasn't remembering, the user prompt. So in that final prompt, in that final API request, I saw the system prompt, but not the user prompt. But I don't know if that's because it wasn't there or because I just wasn't seeing it because I didn't know what to look for. Okay, it looks like it in fact is there. So what does it say? Add some spacing to make it easier to read. Okay, so the system prompt is what we just saw here. You're connected to a Vim plugin that helps me write code, blah, blah, blah. And then the user prompt just says, here's some file content that might be relevant. The prompt isn't really saying what we want done. So that's not too surprising that it's not doing what we want. We haven't told it what we want. So let's see if we can address that. So first of all, how does that work? When we run that GPT send command, send test result, what's supposed to happen? Okay, it's supposed to say, give me the code to make the following failure go away. And that's not happening. It's not sending that request, I don't think. Let's look.
So Jason, sorry, a slightly stupid question. The bit that you were showing just now, the code, is that code that you wrote or was that something you got from somewhere else?
This code?
Yeah.
I wrote this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just a very foggy memory at this point because I wrote it so long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not sure whether it comes as standard with OpenAI or something like that. So yeah, I was not sure.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
sorry. This is just the code for this this plugin that we're using right now. This custom plugin that I'm writing. Okay, so when I do GPT send test result, it's supposed to say, give me the code to make the following failure go away. Oh, I remember this from last time. We're not actually including user content in the request. So no wonder. I think what we want is to do this. Okay. Let's give this whole thing another try now. So I apologize. I did that kind of fast just now. The issue was that I had a mistake where I was defining this variable called user content, but then I wasn't sending that variable with my API request. So no wonder this message wasn't making it through because I wasn't including it in the request. So now that I am including it, let's see if we get any different behavior. We use the same prompt as before. Okay. And we'll run this. Okay. Then we'll send the test result. There we go. Now we get what we were after. It's some code that will supposedly make this failure message go away. Okay. But the problem now is that it's not including this, but one thing at a time. So we just fixed a bug and we changed this code. So let's get rid of this Scratch program we just wrote. These are the changes we made. This is the key change here that fixed the bug. And then we can go ahead and keep the logging change too. That's all. Okay. Okay. So I'll go through the same process yet again. It's going to write this test for us. We'll run the test. Okay. We'll send the failure message. Okay, great. We get back factor calculator. But now, if we run the test again, it still fails because we're not including this file. But rather than making the manual change like last time, I want to see if my plugin can do it. Add a require to the test so it includes factor calculator. Let's see if it's smart enough to handle that. Oh, nice. Um, but that's still not right though, as we'll see if we do run test. Yeah, it needs to be require relative. So let's change our prompt to specifically say require relative. See if it changes it or see if it does it right. Okay, not quite. But we'll look the other way for a second and just pretend it did it right. Okay, now we'll run this and see what we get. Okay, so we get a different failure message. Let's send that failure message now. Now we get a raw error. And this isn't surprising because I remember running into a similar thing before. File is loaded in another buffer. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the real GPT and paste in that error message and say, help me with this error message. Okay, the error indicates that the file you're trying to save is already open in another buffer within NeoVim. Okay. So let's go to the relevant code. So I have this class called editor. That seems relevant. Okay. I'm going to give this to ChatGPT and see what it makes of it. Whoops.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's it saying? Like we should explicitly close the file or something. Is that what it is trying to say?
I'm not sure,
Oh,
but
sure. Okay. Okay.
here, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm giving it the relevant code with the expectation that
Mm.
it's basically going to explain it again, but in the context of my code this time. Okay, your editor class seems to provide utility functions for interacting with the NeoVim environment. That's pretty much right. Okay. Okay. And so it's suggesting a change to the insert code block method. Okay. I actually remember having gone through this before a few weeks ago. And where I landed last time was that I didn't really understand this code. So I think what I want to do now is just look at this code and try to understand it. First of all, what do you guys think this code does? Because if you guys can't look at this code and understand what it does easily, then I've failed in my job of writing easily understandable code. So, what do you think?
What's Python? I'm not even trying it. Oh no, this is not Python.
It's Python. Well, first of all, what's a code block?
Yeah.
That tripped me up for a brief moment just now because I remember now, but I forgot. Code block refers to when GPT gives us a response that contains a code block. But I don't know if that's the clearest way of expressing it in this context. But I can't think of a better way off the top of my head. Can't think of a better term than code block. But anyway, this takes a code block that we get back from GPT and it inserts it into the editor. And I can see that if the code block exists, it does some stuff. Otherwise, it gives this message that says no code found in response. This is easy enough to understand. So let's focus on this, which is less easy to understand. If not self dot is buffer with file name open. Okay. So if the file is not already open, self dot is current buffer empty. If the file is not already open and the current buffer is not empty, then make a new tab. Okay. If okay, if a buffer with the okay, so I think this means like if this file, because we get a file name back with the GPT response, if there's not a tab open with this file name and the current buffer is not empty, then make a new tab.
So, yeah, have you haven't handled the condition where the current buffer is not empty?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I overthinking? Because see, if code block it comes in and then it addresses the case where the current buffer is empty. But
Mm-hmm.
what happens if current buffer is not empty?
Yeah, good question. We have the case if the current buffer is not empty and the file name and the file is
Yeah,
not open, but we don't have when the current buffer is empty and
because we are in that scenario, right? The current buffer is not being empty, isn't it? Because you have passed it something.
Right. This evaluates to if not if the current buffer is not empty, the current buffer is not empty, so this evaluates to true, but this evaluates to false, right?
Hmm.
Because there is a buffer with this file name open.
Yep.
And because this evaluates to false, the whole thing evaluates to false, and this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Which is right. It shouldn't open a new tab because we're just wanting to modify an existing file. Okay, and then we're splitting the block on its new lines. That's kind of irrelevant. And then we say save file. What's that all about? Okay. It seemed like we were kind of running into an issue related to that. Let's look at the error message again. Okay, editor line 18. That's the save file line. Okay. Line 32. That's this. Okay. File is loaded in another buffer. Okay. Yeah, so I think maybe it was trying to, I don't understand what was happening. But at least the error message was file is loaded in another buffer. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's GPT saying? And by the way, I have like no experience with this stuff, so we're all figuring this
Yeah.
out together.
Yeah, figuring out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In the insert code block method, you check if a buffer within the given file name is already open. And if not, and the current buffer is not empty, you create a new tab, correct? You then replace the current buffer's content with a code block and attempt to save it using save file. Yes. The issue seems to be that even after checking for open buffers with the given file name, the file might still be open in another buffer, correct, leading to the error. Let's refine the logic. Avoid force saving. Okay. Refine buffer checking. Instead of just checking for open buffers, also ensure that you switch to the correct buffer before editing and saving. That sounds like what we want. Because it seems like what was happening was, well, I'm not sure. I don't want to think that I know what was happening when I'm really not sure what was happening. So I'll just admit that I'm not sure what was happening. So let's get more sure about that. Like, what was actually happening? Okay. Oh, and this is weird. This file is like incomplete now. Okay, let's just start over with that part. Okay, give me this test. Okay, now we run it. Okay, now we send it. Okay, now we want to do the require relative thing. Okay, we're still good. Now we get this. Okay, let's look at the log response so we can be sure we understand what's happening. Okay. Okay, so the file name is factorizer.rb. So it's trying to save, but it's not the current buffer. It's this other buffer. I'm not sure if I'm using the right words. I'll just say it's not the current tab. It's this other tab. It seems to handle changes to the current tab fine. It's just changes to the other tab is what doesn't work right. Let's do an experiment to make extra sure that we have a handle on it. So let's just do this. Give me a file called json.rb. Okay. Give me a file called martin.rb. Okay. Now in this JSON tab, I'm going to say change. No, I'm going to say in json.rb, change the age from 30 to 39. Okay. Now I'm going to say, I don't even know what it says in the Martin one, but I'll just say the same exact thing. And then my expectation is that we get that same error message. Indeed, we do. Okay, so that's a simpler way of reproducing the same error. It seems that when we try to make a change to a file that's not the current tab, that's when we get the error. Okay.
But the value in Martin RB looked like it was 39.
What's that?
Wasn't the value in there 39 actually?
It did change JSON to 39.
And what's in Martin?
25.
So you have to be in context of the file you want to modify.
It appears so. Yeah, let's do it from here. Change martin.rb from age 25 to 30. And I expect this to succeed, of course. Okay. And then change json.brb from age 39 to 40. And I expect this to fail. Yep. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I want to change this, but I think I want some tests around this stuff.
So
and I do have some.
In the definition,
sorry?
In the definition of the def insert code block, the if code block, does the else, is the else, yeah, the else is for the if code block.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the if code block, as Sanjit says, has to have another else part.
Yes,
yeah.
I agree.
But or do you, okay, leaving that alone, is there a means to simply swap over to the buffer that has the file that you want to manipulate there? In other words, in the instead of if the new
Right.
tab, if the first line in the if code block says change focus to the tab that you're speaking to, do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Then it'll work according to the things that we've seen fail. So
yeah,
you can be in JSON, but you're speaking to Martin. So in that if code block, say switch to the file that I just spoken to. But then again, how the hell do you sort that out?
yeah, I don't know exactly. And before I do any of that, I want to try, if I can, to write some tests around this so I can keep everything straight. So let's see what I have for tests. I don't even remember how to run the tests. Um, There's a spec folder, but that's because of that's not anything to do with this project. That's a Scratch project. Um, okay, GPT plugin package. Oh, tests. There we go. Okay, I have two. Among them is editor test. Okay. So I think it's PyTest something or other. Well, let's try this. Let's try to use our plugin. Ha! It actually worked. That's great. Okay, but I don't want to just run that. I want to run all of our tests. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that currently all of our tests are passing, and indeed they are. Okay. So it looks like we actually have a test for insert code block. And these tests look GPT generated. I have no memory of doing that, but apparently I did. Okay. So we want multiple scenarios here. And this is going to get too confusing if we do it all in this file called editor test. So I'm going to create a new file. In fact, I'm going to create a new directory called editor. And I'm going to make a new file called insert code block test.py. Okay. I'm going to copy this file. I'm going to take out everything except this test. I'm going to remove that test from here. So I've effectively just moved that one test to this new file, but I wanted to retain the shell. Okay, all the tests still pass. I'm going to clean up these Scratch files. I'm going to review my changes. Yes, okay, and I'm just going to say move test. Okay. So this test is kind of vague right now. It just says it's a test for inserting a code block, but we want various scenarios. We want scenarios for Okay. Current buffer is empty and current buffer is not empty. And we also want tests for under that scenario when target file is current buffer. Target file is different buffer. I guess we can do the same ones here. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But that's what I think I want our various scenarios to be. Does that make sense to you guys?
What if the target
Yeah,
file
it does.
Oh, sorry, Martin, go ahead.
What if the target file is not in any buffer? Can that be, is that possible? By the definition of what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no. It is. Yeah.
So maybe
No,
let's
isn't
do
the
this.
NVIM, all the files are relative to NVIM, so the buffers, the only things that ChatGPT can work on is the buffers that are in Vim, correct?
Right.
So you can't manipulate a file that you haven't got in a buffer. All that we're getting a problem with is the focus, is where the focus is set. So the target file is in the current, okay, yeah, so ignore what I just said.
No, I don't want to ignore what you just said because you're forcing us to think more clearly about this. There's a number of different permutations that are possible. So the response that ChatGPT gives us is a file name and some code that's associated with that file name. Okay, I'm going to blow this all away and say GPT gives us a file name and some code associated with that file name. And what are the possible scenarios? One, of course, when we've just opened Vim.
Exist.
What's that?
Well, file name doesn't exist.
Well, let me put it a different way. Because when we've just opened Vim, there's no file names in the picture at all. And so if we've just opened Vim freshly and we say to GPT, write me a file called martin.rb, it's going to give a response that says the file name's martin.rb and here's the content. So in that case, the current buffer is the only buffer, and the current buffer is empty. I think that's how that scenario would be described. Right.
Yeah. So I suppose, one thing to do is before we run the test, we ensure that all buffers are closed. And, if that's possible, and then, take it from there.
Yeah. And I think we can perform such manipulations.
Yeah.
So let's see. Thanks. The current buffer is the only buffer and the current buffer is empty. Okay. And then obviously the current buffer is the only buffer and the current buffer is not empty. Yes, okay. And then there's the case where the current buffer is not the only buffer. And let's express this a slightly different way. There, now it's in a hierarchical sort of format. Okay. The current buffer is not the only buffer. And the the file name, target file name matches the current buffer. Target file name does not match the current buffer. I don't know if this is comprehensive. I think it's probably not, but I kind of want to just get started with the implementation because I feel like going through the process of writing these out will help us think more clearly. Okay. So our current test insert code block test, it's like too vague to be valuable kind of, but let's see what it does. So we're initializing an editor. This file is called testcode.rb. And I'm going to change these so that as we have multiple files, it's going to be easier. Okay. No, it's not realistic. Okay. Change this to martin.rb. Okay, and what's happening here? With open file path R is F, expect an extra, that read equals, that seems like not relevant.
Well, but okay, if you're opening a file in read-only mode, you can't write to it then.
Yeah, this is asserting that there's a new line character at the end of the file. That's like not relevant to what we care about. So I'm just going to kill that. The file needs to be removed after the test. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So let's run this test now. Let's see what happens. Okay, that test passes. That's not surprising. Okay. So let's rename this. So it says current buffer, only buffer. No, current buffer is only buffer, and current buffer is empty. And I'm not sure that that's doing the right thing. So I'm going to say this. Does this test seem right? Okay. GPT seems to think my test is right, so I'm going to go on that for now. Okay, current buffer is empty and current buffer is only buffer and current buffer is not empty. Fill in this test. Okay, so now I'm going to go to GPT. I'm going to say fill in the comment. Because I don't know how to do that. I need GPT's help. Okay. Okay, so we are in fact creating a non-empty buffer. File name. What are we ever doing with the file name? Oh, we're calling insert code block with the file name. Okay. I don't understand all this, but I'm just going to run it to see what happens. Okay, it fails because why? I don't understand why. Let's try to understand this test a little better. Okay, I think I understand it to here. I think I understand it to here. Ensure we're in the new buffer with the inserted code block. Okay. Ensure the initial buffer still contains its original content. Oh, okay. All right, that all seems fine, I guess. So what exactly is the error? Well, let's do this. Explain this failure to me. And I'll wrap up pretty soon because I know we're almost at the hour mark. Okay. Oh, it's expecting a new line at the end, and there's not one. Yeah, I'll just adjust the expected value. Code block plus new line. I see. That still fails. Okay. So we'll feed this back to GPT. I'm not so sure it's I'm not so sure it's testing the right stuff. So what's the test supposed to be again? Current buffer is only buffer and current buffer is not empty. Okay. And our expectation in that case would be that it opens a new tab. Let's see. Okay, let's do this. Change this test so that all it asserts is that a new tab containing the matching the file name contains the expected content. It's trying to test two things. It's testing the content of the new tab and the original tab. To me, that's two different tests. So I'm going to get ready to pull this over. And we'll run this. And that passes. It's not surprising that that passes because that's something, as we know, already works. Okay. So we can commit this change because I feel like we did kind of a lot. It has these blank lines. I'll get rid of that. Okay, let's say add tests. Okay, and just maybe one more quick thing before we go. So this is where I feel like RSpec is a little bit better than PyTest. But I want to say when current buffer is the only buffer and the current buffer is not empty, assert that a new tab matching the file name contains the expected contents. Okay, so that's that one. And now we want this. When the current buffer is the only buffer and the current buffer is not empty, assert that the current buffer's contents are undisturbed. Okay, so now we can ask ChatGPT to fill this in. And the reason I separate those into two tests is because when a test fails, you want it to be clear why it's failing. It should only fail for one reason. Otherwise, it tends to get too confusing. I don't like its test file name. Okay. Expected contents. Original content undisturbed. And if this test is right, I would expect it to pass. It doesn't pass. And I don't know why, but we'll leave it there. That'll be a good point to pick it up at next time. Okay. Well, this is kind of an interesting journey. I'm used to writing tests in Rails, not in Python plugins, and so this is a little bit hard for me, but I think it's good to go through I think it's good to get different perspectives, cuz like if a person only ever works with Ruby on Rails, then you have kind of an incestuous mindset. Whereas if you get experience from
Yeah.
different areas, you see the world from different angles, and you maybe get a little bit smarter.
Indeed, yeah. You know what? I started with Python some time ago and somehow dropped it. But I had to get established in Ruby and then possibly, yeah. As you said, it's always good to work on more than one technology. Otherwise it's a bit blinkered vision, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well,
Cool.
any other comments before we go? No? All right.
No.
Well, thanks as
Okay.
always, and see
See
you
ya.
guys next time.
Bye bye. Bye.
Cheers.